Hello, everyone. My name is Richard Royan, President of the Berlin Board of Education. Thank you very much for coming to our special meeting tonight, July 27th of 2020. We have all of our members are here right now. I see Adam just came in, Julia. So I think Mary Ellen's going to be a little bit late, and we are without Carrie Sasso tonight as a prior commitment. So we can start right up with the Pledge of Allegiance, and then I have a few things to say, and we'll get into our audience of citizens. So we can start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under justice, God, forever. Thank you. All right. Tonight, first I want to thank all of our board members for making themselves available for a special meeting tonight. I know this was not in our plans, middle of summer, on such a glorious day to be outside with your family. As we're all, boy, Adam's shaking his head already. Yes, I know it's very hot. I know we have some people that are outside right now with their families, but making themselves available for the meeting. Very, very much appreciated, cutting your time away or vacation time or family time to be here tonight. I also want to thank Brian and his staff, and also the parents, Board of Ed members who made themselves available, teaching staff. Thank you for attending those virtual Q&A sessions that were held last week. I was not able to go to any of them, but we had a board member at all of them. And I heard some very, very good things about it and some positive questions, some feedback, and hopefully a lot of these questions are being answered as we're going forward. As we know, going forward, still, we are without a definitive plan, but today's address by the governor and the commissioner kind of put us on a little bit better of a track. However, it just ended roughly an hour ago, and so we have to kind of digest and process exactly what's been said and where that leaves the district. Before we go forward into the audience of citizens, I would like to say that this will be our last virtual meeting, God willing, please let it be our last virtual meeting, and that we will be in person starting on August 10th. We had given some thought to going in person tonight. However, we need personnel, buildings, there's implications, district-wide implications, and last week, Brian and his staff were so busy trying to create and plan and submit to the governor the 3 plans that were asked for by Friday, and also holding all the virtual meetings and so much preparation work. I really didn't think that would be fair on short notice to try to pull manpower and resources away from the district at that point. But going forward, the August 10th one, there is some planning. It's still very complicated in terms of how to do this, because according to the governor's executive orders, we are still only allowed 25 people inside. So the plan right now would be probably to utilize either McGee or the Berlin High School auditorium. I'll help Brian, allow Brian to make that decision rather, and he and I will talk and plan this thing out, what works best. Because we're limited to only 25 people, we would need to set up some kind of a system where we knew exactly how many slots were available. So we have to generate our agenda first to know which staff members we need in addition to the Board of Education members that will be there, thereby creating a certain number of slots that would be available to the general public to sit in a spaced out, socially distant way in the auditorium. So all of that will be coming. I'm going to be meeting with Brian later this week to kind of flesh out exactly what that's going to look like and who needs to be there in person, and therefore how many seats we're going to have available in the auditorium to be able to use. And then some kind of a sign-up sheet will probably be sent out through Brian's office to the parents in the community to allow people who want to come live to be able to sit with us. But I still will accept audience of citizen emails like we have been doing. We've gotten a lot of them for tonight. We're going to address about 8 or 9 of them as the meeting is going on, even though there's only 2 things on the agenda tonight. Obviously, they're both incredibly important, and I know that anybody tuning in more than likely is interested in the startup plan for the fall. So Brian and Aaron and anybody else, and the administrators are here as well tonight to hopefully answer questions. So we can get right into the audience of citizens. All right. Our first question. And I started it with some what I felt were easier single one-off questions. Some of the more complex ones that I think will be answered in Aaron or Brian's conversations later on, we'll kind of save till a little bit further along. So the first question is from Carmela, and I believe the last name is Sanseverino. Please tell me you don't need me to spell that one for you, Julia. I don't know if I said it clearly enough. Sanseverino, I believe her name is. So Brian, are teachers, faculty?
Actually, could you please send that? Could you please spell it or email it to me after?
Sure. What I'll do is I'll send all of them to you So you'll have the names. However, not everybody included their last name, so I had to ask for some last names. And unfortunately, I don't have addresses again.
Okay.
That is one hole with using the email system that I haven't fixed yet. So the first one, Brian, from Carmela. Are teachers, faculty, and aides or volunteers going to be tested prior to school opening and then periodically?
At this time, teachers and faculty and paraprofessionals will not be tested prior to the start of school. Should there be an issue where there's a concern that they feel they have symptoms, then they would be tested at that time.
Thank you very much. Second question is from Marianne Zadrowski. Another rather simple one, because I know the answer to this one, but I'll let you respond to it. Is there another option to school with the Board of Education rather than in-school live learning?
So we've been required by the state to provide 3 plans for opening. One of them is a live full plan. In that first plan, the plan that was required until the press conference today, where the governor commissioner alluded to the districts having more input into what model works best for the district. That plan allows parents to either choose live, in-person instruction, or virtual instruction, as we call it, remote. In the plan, it's called remote learning. So even with our full live plan, if parents choose to not send their children to school, they would receive education through the remote plan. And then within that remote plan, that remote learning, it's not a remote plan, remote learning, they would be receiving instruction different depending on the grade level. Grades 6 through 12 would receive instruction via a Zoom and a camera system, much different than what we use for distance learning. It's an interactive system where the student is on the screen seeing the teacher as well as what's going on in the class, can raise their hand, can interact with other students, interact with the teacher. Students can see the students in class, can see the student at home also. That's for grades 6 through 12. And at the elementary level, for the remote learning, we would have a designated teacher that would be working with the students remotely, doing some live instruction virtually, them teaching as well as students receiving instruction over Zoom. That would be at the elementary level, and some posting of assignments and so on. So that's the first model, which is the full live, everyone coming back to school except for those people that choose not to. So that's the one option. The other one, if we go with what's called the hybrid model, a little different. Currently, our model that we've put in our draft plan, and we're still discussing it a little, the hybrid model would go with an A-B day. 2 days a week, Group A would go to school, and 2 days a week, Group B would go to school. The opposite days would be virtual, and Wednesday would be a virtual day for all, to allow small groups to get pulled together and to allow for office hours. That's the hybrid plan. And then the distance learning plan is the last plan, which the schools are closed. All students are learning from a distance, at home. And that model is similar to where we were last year. But in our discussions, it would look much different. The accountability and the amount of live instruction would increase drastically from what it was when we left. So those are the 3 models, and parents have input along the way. Obviously, on both ends, the live model does not require all students to come to school. Parents still can elect to have their students learn remotely. The distance model is 100% distance, and that means there's a heightened level of concern. If you look at the plan, it's the red. It's if we're at that level, and that's typically something that, in the past, it's been the governor decide that we're at that level where it's total distance. But hearing the comments today, that may be something that pockets of the state or even individual school districts go with if there's an outbreak of COVID.
Thank you, Brian. Brian, I just want to emphasize, to me, the hybrid is the most complex, but probably one of the better workable plans of the 3 stages at the beginning. And he did mention just now that it's still kind of in formation stage, that nothing is definite. We're still working around the best way to put this thing together, right?
Yes. I mean, currently we're looking at the A-B day, but when we're talking about the secondary, to give a little more input, students wouldn't be A-B. If they're A-B, they're still in the classroom virtually because of the camera system. We are looking at an alternative plan where we would have, and I'll get into this more in the plan, because we can cohort students to the greatest extent at the elementary. Really, there's 2 cohorts that students are with at the elementary. The cohort is the bus, the transportation if they get transported to school, and then they're with their class for the entire day. So recess looks much different. They're not intermingling with other classes. It's just their class in a designated area. We could really cohort the students at 25 or less. We feel that given that we can cohort at that level, the safety risk, the safety is much greater than if we at the middle school or high school where the cohorting is larger. So if we were at a hybrid model, the other that it's not in the plan, but as we are looking at the possibility of going with 100% elementary back daily because of our ability to cohort. But I'll explain a little more about that in the plan.
All right. And I don't mean to bump you into some of the things you had prepared for the plan, but in monitoring and looking at some of the comments that I've received in emails and also through some Facebook posts recently, there seems to be a lot of confusion in town about the difference between remote learning, as you've just described, and homeschooling. Do you think you could just take a moment to explain the difference? So those terms appear to be interchangeable online, but they're not.
Brian, do you want me to take that one?
You sure can, Aaron. Go ahead.
Thank you, Aaron.
So, parents in the state of Connecticut have always had the right and the option to homeschool their children. The state law allows for home instruction, and families file what's called a notice of intent to tell us that they are planning to provide instruction at home for their children. And families have done that for years for a variety of reasons. In the current situation, the Commissioner of Education and the Governor are supporting the idea that some families might want to temporarily have their children receive instruction at home because of the COVID-19 pandemic and the related concerns. And the primary difference is that in a remote learning setting, in this situation, the district is continuing to provide support for that learning at home, where in a true homeschooling model, the parents accept full responsibility for the instruction and do not receive support from the district.
So if I was a parent and I wanted to homeschool, I would actually have to withdraw my child from the district in order to be able to qualify for homeschooling in that definition. Okay.
Yes. And in the current survey that we just did, there's a tiny fraction of families are choosing that option.
Yep. Thank you very much. I just know that the word is being used interchangeably online, and I just want to make sure people are clear at the difference. Thank you, Aaron.
Yes.
Appreciate it.
If they look at the part of the plan that has that lays out our models of instruction, we did separate it out and try to define it in that part of the plan.
Thank you very much. Got an easy one for you in the fourth one. This is from Erin Roach. She says, good evening. Will students who choose remote learning be allowed to participate in extracurricular activities at Berlin High School?
If the students are receiving remote learning, they're still part of the school district. The concern would be if you think coming into school is going to be a safety risk, then being involved in athletics or co-curricular might have that same safety risk. But as far as being allowed, yes, would be allowed because they're part of the school district still. They are enrolled, they're just receiving remote learning.
And as of now, there is no change, at least yet, from the CIAC in terms of sports in the fall. But extracurricular activities that might exist at a high school, clubs and activities, for example, that's still to be determined from your angle.
Yes, we've already begun to look at what clubs could exist regardless of distance learning or remote learning, whatever type of learning. But at this point, we are planning on sports, but obviously the CIAC is the governing body. They'll determine whether they'll allow sports to go, but at this point, they are anticipating sports programs to move forward.
Thank you very much. Next one. This is from Adeline Carrion. I believe she wrote to us last time or the time before. She said, good afternoon. My name is Adeline Carrion. I am the mother of, and she names her child. He'll be a 6th grader this fall, and I'm reaching out with a concern about him going back to school. As of right now, I am not planning on sending my son back to school in the fall. However, I'm considering sending him for the spring semester, depending on the status of the pandemic. I think a lot of parents may fall into this category. His father and I do not feel comfortable sending him because of reports of health experts stating that COVID may get worse during the flu and winter season. Our son has asthma. I don't feel comfortable exposing him. So here's the question. Are there any logistics or options for parents like me who are choosing to keep their children home in the fall and also choosing to send them to school in the spring?
So the two options that would be available, they obviously could choose remote learning, which just means that they would receive their instruction at home. In sixth grade, it would be they'd be in a class, enrolled in a class. Should they choose at any point to come into the school and to receive the instruction live, they would stay in the same class that they currently have. When they're receiving the remote instruction, it would be via a camera system, so they would be in their classes with their peers and follow the schedule as they would if they were in school. The other option would be the homeschooling option, Rich, where they would opt to homeschool. If you do select the homeschool, you're no longer part of the district, so there's no oversight of curriculum. We're required to have a check-in meeting once a year. In that case, they're no longer part of the district, could not participate in any extracurricular and so on if you choose homeschooling. But those are the two options.
So just to reiterate for my benefit, if somebody chooses to keep their child home and be part of the remote distance learning that we're putting forward, at any point they could return their child to school if they deem it to be the appropriate move.
Yes, whether they choose remote or homeschooling, they could return to school at any point. The difference is remote, the instruction, the curriculum, the oversight is still the district's. The homeschooling, all of that oversight becomes a responsibility of the parent, whoever they deem the homeschool.
So it would probably be more of a seamless transition from the remote learning into coming back in person rather than homeschooling, since there may not be a curricular connection to what they're doing at home.
I think that is the case, yes.
Thank you. All right, next question. This is from Olivia Saker, I believe, S-A-K-R. Saker. I don't want to get her name wrong. I apologize. This one talks about our summer school. She said she'd be very interested in hearing from our summer school parents on their children's experience with attending school with the new guidelines, since we are one of the few districts doing in person. I did tell her I can't connect her with other parents. However, perhaps Mrs. Holian might be here, or there's somebody here who can help give us a little bit of insight as to how the summer in-person work has gone.
Sure, Rich. This is Linda Holian, the Director of Pupil Personnel Services. We are on our final week of our 3-day program. Next week will be the final week of our 5-day program, and the summer program is going absolutely wonderful. The kids are happy to be in school. The staff are happy to be in school. Everyone's doing a wonderful job with the social distancing and wearing masks. I joke a little bit that it's much quieter because the masks are on, but you know, there haven't been any issues. The kids are working hard. We had some kids that completed their work early, so they're all done. But I mean, summer school has gone absolutely smooth. We didn't really experience any hiccups. You know, we did have a few kids that came in and had, you know, different symptoms. The nurses followed the protocol. Nothing actually was COVID related, so the kids came back to school. So absolutely no hiccups. I know the mask issue is a big concern for some families. You know, the majority of our kids are wearing masks the whole day with mask breaks. We do have some of our little ones at preschool, or some of our kids with sensory issues, that we're just working through it. Whether the kids are wearing them below their chin for a little bit and we're slowly working them on, whether they keep them on for a couple minutes, you know, that's all a process to get the kids to be able to wear the mask for longer periods of time. Some of the masks don't fit some of our little ones appropriately, so the staff have been rigging together different types of masks to see what works for them. Some of the kids are wearing the shields, but all precautions are taking place. One of the teachers told me one of the little guys came out of the room without his mask on, and he started running down the hallway. We're working on running down the hallway, and they said, "Stop, where's your mask?" He ran inside, got his mask on, but he kept running down the hallway. So, I mean, the kids are doing wonderful with the masks. So.
Thank you. And actually, I want to just shift over to Tracy Sissy for a moment, because she said she may have some insight as a parent of a child who's going to summer school. But Linda, the next question actually is probably as well for you, as much for you as anybody else. So let's get Tracy first. Tracy, do you have any insight as a parent, from a parental point of view, on summer school?
Hi, Tracy Sisti, board member. Yes, I actually had great experiences, and so did my son with the summer school program. At first, he was like anybody else, you know, you got to wear a mask. It's uncomfortable or it's something different, but it was so professional and kind the way the teachers are, and giving them a break. I would go pull up sometime to get them early, and there were kids outside taking their mask breaks. Everything was like smooth. They had their squares that they stayed in, and it definitely was I guess a positive transition in this scary time that we're going through. But the way that it was ran, and it was incredible. It was very safe. My child felt safe, secure, and I was very pleasantly pleased. They did a wonderful, wonderful job with all the kids, in my opinion.
That's great to hear. Thank you very much, Tracy. So actually, I forgot that you were a parent of a child taking part, so that's good that you were able to provide some insight. Thank you. Linda, I think this next question is as much for you as anybody else. It concerns special education. So this is from Heather Surface, Serfass, Surface. Am I correct in understanding that there will be no exceptions or accommodations made in terms of mask or face shield wearing for students with disabilities at any level, specifically regarding autistic students? Would they be required to wear one in order to enter the building and remain in school? And then secondly, why has the decision been made to require preschool students to wear masks and face covering when daycare or private programs are not?
Yeah, again, you know, we had a lot of conversations about the preschool kids, but again, it's part of the guidelines that anyone in the public school setting needs to have the mask on. And again, I can't say enough, our preschool kids are not having a problem with wearing masks. You know, I even went into a classroom one time, and one of our little guys want to hug our adults. That's what they do. So the paraprofessional put on the gown, she had on her gloves, she had on her face shield, and the kid teaching the kids, okay, if we're going to hug adults or we're going to sit in our laps, these are the precautions we have to take. So our preschool children are not having a problem wearing the mask. Now, of course, the day is going to be longer. Not for the preschool kids, but for the other kids. So again, we just have to build up their stamina. Same with our autistic kids that we're working with now. We're working on building the stamina. We've had these conversations with Brian about, as long as we could keep that 6 feet social distance between other kids, then we're going to work step by step with them to be able to have them tolerate the mask. If we have some kids that are constantly running around and are having difficulty keeping that social distance, and we can't keep other kids safe and other staff members safe, I mean, our staff members will have a mask on and the shield working with those students. Our staff members are going to be sitting side by side them all of the time. Then we'll have to work and say, are there other areas that we can work with this student? Can we keep everyone safe? If not, we may have to look at other programming options. So I think every child is going to have to be on an individual basis. I mean, we had one little one this summer that she could not be in the classroom with all her peers all summer because she's a get up and goer. She's on the spectrum. She's nonverbal. She just will sit at her desk for a short period of time, and then she has to get up and do spurts. So we had her in another room working with staff members. When we could put her with her peers, we did that. So I think we have to look at it as a case-by-case basis for our kids.
Thank you very much.
With safety being the ultimate concern.
Absolutely. Thank you. I appreciate your thoughts. Next question. This is from Julie Arcilla, Arcila. Arcilla. I'm concerned about sending my kids back to school. I thought there are restrictions on the amount of people gathering, hence why my oldest cannot have a proper graduation. Well, I guess we define proper. Certainly traditional. Is the district anticipating the amount of people gathering to increase by the governor by the beginning of school? And then also, for McGee and BHS, how will students pass in the hallways or enter or exit the building?
So I can speak to that. So there'll be directions in the hallway. There'll be one-way stairwells, one-way hallways at the Berlin High School and at McGee. As far as exiting and entering the building, I'll talk about it in the plan. But dismissal from school will look much different. students entering the school look much different because of the social distancing that needs to take place, as well as wearing the mask. As far as goes, how can the schools open versus the numbers? That's really the governor decides on the phases. So, I think the governor originally hoped to be at phase 3, as we all did, but yet we're at phase 2. And I think that might be part of the message that he had today, just an hour ago, with the commissioner about leaving up to the districts to decide what model, whether it's the full live, hybrid, or distance, giving more autonomy to the district. So initially, the governor's message was everyone needs to open fully and plan for it. And so whether the phase 2 is only 25 and now the schools, that's really the message we're getting from the governor. So hope that answers the questions.
Yeah, I think it does. And we have 2 more. And I think that I may read both of these. If you want to address them right away, you can. Otherwise, I'm assuming that both these questions at the end will be addressed in your discussion of the first agenda item. First one is from Michelle Follacchio. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing it. Follacchio. What is the realistic plan once flu season hits and there are symptoms overlap with COVID? Are we going to get a notice every day or every other day that someone in our child's class is potentially infected with COVID? Do we shut the school down every time there's a suspected case until it's determined negative or just the flu? Parents work and need to be able to plan a schedule. Long or short-term obstacles create problems. So can you explain at least briefly, or do you want to wait until the next presentation piece?
I can share briefly. As far as the messaging that we've had, even with summer school, with staff and students, the messaging guidelines that we've been given, it's not so much that they have the symptoms. If a student does test positive or a staff member with COVID, we would be contacting the Central Connecticut Health District, and we would be having a conversation of what plan to implement at that time, whether it's students that were just in the cohort, whether it's a school that'd be shut down, whether it's the district, and there'd be notifications going out, obviously, to everyone that's impacted by it. So it wouldn't be a measure of just, are they displaying symptoms? It would be when it's an actual case of COVID.
All right, thank you. The last one, letter from Carla Durity, 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 I believe you pronounce it. She actually has a whole bunch of questions, so I'll read it, but I'm guessing that your next explanation in your presentation will probably answer most of these. Either that, they're all about elementary school, so perhaps one of the elementary admins who are here could help out as well. Will kindergarten be full day? What is the start and end time? Will the children need to wear masks? How many children will be in each classroom? How many breaks or lunch break will they have? Can children bring their own food or snacks? Where will they eat? If the school provides food, what kind of food will it be? And how many kids will be in the bus? So there's a lot of individual questions. This is really getting into the details of the opening plan, and I would guess maybe not all of these have answers yet, but I can either repeat them or we can move into your explanation and address them little by little. What do you think?
Rich, Brian Brigny here. I think it'd be best if we just took them one at a time. We can have the elementary principals if you'd like to speak to them, or Aaron and I can jump in. So if you want to just go one by one.
I'll read them. Oh, absolutely. I'll read them one by one. So will kindergarten be full day? And then what is the start and end time?
Al?
Hi. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, absolutely. You have to introduce yourself though, Al, please.
Yeah, sure. This is Al Souza, principal of Harvard Elementary School. The plan right now is to start with kindergartners they will be there for the full day of school. We have worked out, subsequent to a virtual parent orientation, a modified kindergarten welcome for this summer that all 3 elementary schools are planning for the families. So we'll be able to meet our kindergartners and families face-to-face in a safe manner. So hopefully we'll be able to, they will be starting the school year with everyone else. Certainly we are mindful of the age and their introduction to school, and I'm sure conversations will continue around having the best opening for them, but that's what we have planned right now for the moment. And Dave and Meg, if you want to hop in at all with that.
Thanks. We'll get you for Meg or Dave. We'll get you for the next question. Thank you.
All right. Will the children need to wear masks? I think we actually already responded to that, but Are we shaking our head? Yes, we are shaking our head, except in the rare occasion, as Ms. Holian stated earlier, where we have to make individual judgments, maybe children with disabilities, special education children, et cetera. Next, approximately how many children?
Rich, can you
I'm
hold on?
sorry, go ahead.
Because part of the question was the start and end time.
Oh, I apologize. Yes, start and end time. Yes.
So our school day officially begins at 8:40 a.m. and ends at 3:20 p.m. So the start time would be the same as the entire school.
Thank you. How many children are in the classroom? It's a hard question to answer. Can we give a range, perhaps?
Sure.
Please make sure that you introduce yourselves again, whoever's going to answer it.
David, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, sure. David Kipman, principal at Griswold School. Right now, our kindergarten numbers, we're waiting to get responses from families in the survey that went out to know what the concrete numbers are, but we're anticipating at Griswold School around 16. And Alan, Meg, if you want to add what you're anticipating at your schools, I'm not sure what those are.
Sure, I'm Megan Soroyce, principal of Willard School, and we are around between 14 and 15. So per class, we have 4 sections.
Al Souza, principal at Hubbard. We're right around those numbers. We have 2 classes, so 1 or 2 students, one way or the other, can really push the numbers in either direction. But I would say we're commensurate with that.
Thank you very much, all 3 of you. Are you planning breaks? And I'm assuming by breaks, these could be mental breaks or mask breaks.
Absolutely, and I know we've had a ton of discussion around the mask snare and the mask breaks. I think we're operating from a position where we know the masks are the primary method for safety for students, but we are looking in every way where we can provide students with appropriate breaks in a safe and healthy manner. So we're not thinking about all the different opportunities where students will have masks on. We know that's the deferred to safety measure. We're trying to plan and think of all those times students will have those mask breaks in a range of environments, whether it be out at recess, times at specials, times in the classroom. But there are very particular safety measures that we need to adhere to that we're very aware of that we'll make sure to adhere to.
If I could just add to that, Brian.
Sure, please.
Yes, we'll have scheduled mask breaks in certain times, but students will be able to take a mask break when needed. We'll make sure that we have a location that's 6 foot distance, that's acceptable social distancing distance, where they could take their mask off, meaning that, mask break is not until we go out for recess, but it's 25 minutes before recess and I need that mask break. We're going to provide an opportunity for every student that needs one to be able to get a mask break. We recognize that it cannot just be at scheduled time.
Thank you. Mrs. Soroyce, I got a few food questions. You want to take the lunch questions? Can the children bring in their own food or snacks?
Absolutely, and we along those lines, we encourage water bottles to come into, as we will not be using water fountains.
Good point. I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you. How about where will they eat?
So students will be having lunch in their classroom. We will make sure that surfaces are cleaned before and after eating. Students will also have individual shields at their desks to make sure that when they're removing their masks, we will keep them safe during that time.
Now, the next question I'm not sure you can answer, but they want to know what kind of food you're going to be serving for lunch.
Well, that is a great question, but there's usually an array of choices so that we make sure everyone finds something that they like.
But we're still doing hot lunches in addition to cold.
At this time, I believe so.
Brian,
I could speak a little further. So we will be serving hot lunches as we have in the past. There will be choices for those lunches. They will be served in a enclosed container, meaning that when students receive their lunch, they will be taking it back to the classroom. And so it needs to be enclosed. They'll pick it up enclosed. They'll have a cover on it. And that's how they'll receive their lunch. But it will be a similar menu to what it has been in the past.
Thank you. And then the last question, Brian, may be toward you, or you can defer to somebody else. Approximately how many kids will be in a bus? I know it varies from bus to bus, but is there any kind of anything you can help out with range here?
Sure. We still don't know the exact number of students that will elect to come back to live instruction or those that will have remote. But we are running the same bus routes that we've run in the past. So if we had all students taking the bus that were scheduled for that route, the buses will look as they did last year. We're encouraging parents to take their children to school when possible, which will decrease the number of students on the bus. We are putting provisions in on the bus as far as where students are sitting, meaning getting on the bus in a certain order and then getting off in an order that, when the way the stops work, either getting on or off, so students aren't passing through. First students on, first students on, the last one's off, and vice versa. We're also looking at, we know that our buses take 2 runs. They typically take a high school or middle school run, then they take an elementary run. We're looking at assigned seats so that the same students are on that bus in those seats. So there'd be, 2 or 3 middle school, high school students for one run, and 2 or 3 elementary students if we were at maximum capacity. If we're not running at maximum capacity, then we'll disperse the students throughout the bus as much as possible. I think it's important, and I'll say it during the presentation, but I'll say it now. In order to ride the bus, the student needs to have a mask on prior to entering the bus. That mask must stay on the entire bus ride. That is the prerequisite to get on the bus. Drivers will not be letting students on the bus without a mask. If a student is unable to wear a mask, as we talked about, because of extenuating circumstances, we will have to arrange for other transportation. It's the safety of all students, including the driver on that bus. If we can't socially distance at 6 feet, which in all likelihood on the bus that will not be the case, then the mask is the barrier that's protecting the student and the other students and the driver.
So let me ask a clarifying question that came out of summer school. And Linda, whether it's Linda or Brian or Aaron, somebody can help out. These rules, so from my understanding, we will not be taking the kids' temperatures before they get on the bus, correct?
That's correct.
Correct. But in the summer school, we did, or we currently are, because the summer school guidelines came out earlier, and that was one of the summer school guidelines that came out, and that has changed now, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Those are all the questions we have from the audience at the moment, and I know at this point we're into the reopening plan, many of which we've probably talked about already, but if Brian, Aaron, anybody else, if you want to kind of give us an overview of what the plan is, we appreciate it, please.
Sure. Aaron, I don't know if you'd like to start with just a brief overview. My portion, I'd really like to talk about starting off the day and then take you through what the day is going to be like for students. So from the time on the bus, the breakfast, and so on. But Aaron, if you wouldn't mind, if you'd like to give us a quick overview of how the plan was put together, and then I'll take it from there.
Sure. We started to work on the plan by assembling a district-wide reopening committee. And over the course of the past couple of months, we've had members of the reopening committee work collaboratively with each other. We've also worked through the workshop series with the Connecticut Center for School Change. And both Brian and I, as well as a number of the administrators, are part of other networking groups where we're able to get ideas from other school districts and to learn from others as their plans evolved. And certainly that continues to be the case. As you mentioned earlier that the press conference today had some new information for all of us. And I think one of the things that I would say from the press conference and from the way that we've taken this all the way through is that we have to remain flexible and our plans are going to need to be fluid. So while the governor and the commissioner have asked all of the districts to plan for multiple scenarios, that is shifting rapidly in terms of how this looks like it's going to play out. If you had asked me 2 weeks ago, I would have said hybrid was the least likely to happen. And tonight, I think that hybrid is much more likely to happen than I would have thought even last Friday when we submitted our draft plan. So overall, in terms of the draft plan, Brian, a number of the things that are core elements have been brought up already. We've talked quite a bit about mask and face covering. We've talked about cohorting. We've talked about distancing in the classroom and all of the safety measures that we've asked parents and staff members to put in place to do their own screenings before they come to school. Rich, as you just mentioned, the summer school guidelines were a bit different because the summer school guidelines were released in May when we were really in a much different place in the pandemic. You heard the governor say today that we've been under 1% positivity daily for over a month now, and that's a very different place than we were in May when they were drafting guidelines. And for those reasons, we expect that the guidelines will continue to change as we move forward based on the current health metrics. And that's the message that Commissioner Cardona and Governor Lamont made repeatedly during the press conference today. We've planned for several models of instruction. We highlighted those a bit at the beginning, but in essence, we're planning for a full return to school with all the social distancing, mask, face coverings, hand washing and hygiene protocols in place. At the same time, we've been planning simultaneously for remote learning, with the idea being that the governor and the commissioner are very clear that parents will have an option not to send their children back to school at the beginning of this school year if they don't feel that the conditions are safe for their own child. That's a personal choice that they'll make, and the district is supporting that by providing remote learning options.
Aaron, can we talk just for a moment? Sorry to interrupt. Can we talk, Brian Benigni, can we talk for a minute, planning for the live instruction? Can we just talk for a moment about let's share, and the administrators also, let's share a little about some of the provisions and safety protocols that we put in place. So right now we're hiring 5 part-time custodians, 1 full-time custodian. Lavatories will be cleaned multiple times throughout the day. All desks we wipe down at the end of the day as well as once during the day, flat surfaces by the custodial staff. There has been hand sanitizers put in every classroom. There's paper towel dispensers in all lavatories. Now you no longer touch, you just can pull them. Anything else I'm missing as far as safety protocols? There'll be a sheet that will be sent to you on Friday. Hopefully, it'll talk about what the safety measures are that are put in place as far as cleaning, as well as what products are being used. There also has been some guidance from the state as far as the air handlers and how they expect the air handlers to run throughout the day, as well as how they expect them to cycle at night and pulling in fresh air. I'll also be sending you a notice on that with what we're doing to meet those requirements. Am I missing anything else as far as, I think it's important, I don't know if someone wants to talk about the purchases at the elementary school, such as the sneeze guards and so on. I don't know if someone wants to share. David, would you share some of the provisions that we're putting in place to ensure the safety of the students?
Yeah, sure. David Kitzman, principal of Griswold School. Brian, you mentioned a few things I'll build off of. As far as bathrooms go, classrooms our cohorts are also assigned specific bathrooms, so that we'll have minimizing interactions between cohorts and restrooms. So, for example, on the East Hallway at Griswold School, there's student boys and girls bathrooms. Those will be for 5th grade students. No matter where the students are in the building, if they have to use the restroom, they'll go to their cohorted bathroom to minimize interactions. You mentioned sneeze guards. We have desk shields that we've ordered for all the desks in the classroom. These are also, I have one here somewhere, I'd show it to you, but we can take them, they can clip into a desk, you can take them out, so if you're going to move to go to another table, you can take your shield with you and sit it down in front of you to ensure that you have something in front of you while you're working with someone. We'll also use those during snack and lunchtime in the classrooms to add another level of protection for the students and the staff in the room. We're also doing a great deal of contact tracing. We have sign in and out sheets for all adults that might go into a classroom, just so we know who's been into what room and who's been in interactions with one another, and we're also tracking the cohorts on the buses.
Thanks, David.
You're welcome.
Brian, before we move off of the safety measures, I'm wondering if any board member has either comments or questions specifically about safety measures in our buildings. Instead, just maybe we can break this down into multiple layers instead of presenting everything all at one time. Does anybody have anything that they'd like to ask or say?
I think the other piece is, each teacher and each staff member, actually, and every student will be provided with 2 cloth masks. The expectation is that they'll be, able to wear their own mask should they elect to, as long as it meets the requirement. Very adamant that it can't be a bandana. It needs to be a mask that covers the nose down to the chin, and it cannot have those one-way valves in the mask. It must be one that's because of that. When you have that one-way valve, you're able to expel through it, so it really defeats the purpose. So, we're allowing students, we'll provide here, we're allowing students and staff to select their own mask as long as it meets the requirements.
Brian, can I add something about the mask?
Please, please, please.
Have one here for the students. We're purchasing these 2 for each student at the elementary level. We're also purchasing them in multiple colors, so that the likelihood of there being more than 1 or 2 of the same color in the classroom, and the students, if they have to take it off for a mask break and picking up the wrong one, is reduced. There's also a spot here, you probably can't see very well, I don't know how big that picture is, where a student can put their initials, their name, again, to minimize the likelihood that someone else's mask will get picked up and worn by another student. Same thing for the staff. We've ordered 2 for each staff member, as well as having many disposable ones on hand as well in case they're needed. But that's just another layer, as you were talking about the masks, is something we've looked into.
And for
Thank you very
staff, one of the questions I received, Richard, for staff, we're allowing staff to have what's called a desk shield, should they elect to, as well as having a face shield if they elect to. Any staff member that would like that. The desk shield is really if they're working at their desk and someone comes up quickly on them, they're able to not grab their mask, but still that initial barrier for them. So those are some of the items that we purchased. I think it's also important, I don't know, at the elementary, we've had to purchase over 250 desks. Typically we use tables. Those did not allow for social distancing, so we purchased those desks at the elementary level.
Good point as well. So there's a significant financial investment in preparation for September as well. Thank you.
Yep. Aaron, I'm sorry to jump in there, Aaron, if you don't mind. Al, do you have something else?
Just really quick, just a couple of quick notes for elementary as well. We're not only thinking about the purchasing of those PPEs, but how we move throughout the building, such as we do have 2-way hallways, but keeping students to the right side of the hallways. Out at recess, we have defined recess spaces, which cohorts are going to rotate through, and there will be routine cleaning in between uses. And as well as we talked a little bit about the classroom, but we're also thinking about all the specials area as well. So art, music, PE, library, how to offer students those experiences in creative ways while keeping them safe, but also not impacting the programs negatively for them.
Thanks, Al.
Thank you.
Brian, I think if you want to walk through the day as you planned, then we can take additional questions from there.
All right, you don't want to rewind, huh? Okay, I'll take it from there. So let's start today from the bus. I think it's best to talk. We talk about at the bus stop. The bus stops will be similar to what they have in the past. If students are at the bus stop and they can't socially distance at 6 feet or greater, they should have their mask on. Upon entering the bus, it is mandatory that they have a mask on in order to enter the bus. If they don't have a mask on, they will not be allowed to enter the bus. Once on the bus, the mask should remain on. I spoke to a little about how we're going to assign the seats. So at most, there would be 6 students sitting in those seats, either high school students and elementary students, in a specific seat. The seats will get wiped down between runs, as well as at the end of the day. Once arriving at school, the protocols for arriving at school and the entrance into school are different for each level and each building as far as where they want to be entered. So I'm going to leave that for a later date, but I can assure you that it's not going to be at the secondary level where they would just get off and everyone can intermingle. Social distancing will have to be in place. The mask will be on. The various entrance points in the building may have changed, but that's something that the principals will share at a later date with you. Once in the building, the ability to have breakfast still. We still are going to allow breakfast. It'll be almost that grab-and-go type breakfast. They will not be allowed to congregate in the cafeterias. They'll have to take whatever breakfast they have and go back to their classroom where they would have their desk shield and be able to eat at the same place at the elementary, be able to eat lunch. At the high school and middle school, it would be in the classrooms that they would have breakfast. At that point of the day, if we were in the live model, the elementary day would look very similar as far as time-wise. I think that the elementary principal spoke to a little about the distancing that would take place and how the classroom would work, as well as the specials coming into the classroom, not leaving the classroom, so they would remain with those students. The recess would not be multiple classes using the same area. They would rotate through, as Al said. At the middle school level, students would be cohorted, meaning that the team is a cohort. One of the provisions after the mask is really cohort. So typically you'd have 100 students that would make up a cohort. Those students would be with that same teachers, the same group of students throughout the day. So at the middle school, you would be going to the cafeteria for lunch, but I'm going to ask Mr. Urso if he could share a little bit more about lunch at the middle school. Mr. Urso?
No, we're not hearing you. We're not hearing you. I can see that you're here and you have your voice on.
I could speak to it then.
Okay.
But if he gets on, he could share. So there'll be multiple locations for lunch. Some will eat in the classroom at McGee. Some will eat in the cafeteria. Some will eat in the outside picnic area. Some will eat in the gymnasium. So we're going to take the 4 lunchways that McGee typically has, and he's taken those 4 lunchways and dividing it 4 times to disperse the students, and it will be on a rotational basis. So if you ate in your classroom for this week, the next week you might be in the cafeteria. So students won't always be the same students be restricted to the same area, but there will be hot lunch, same thing, and it will be in a covered, sealed container. But we'll be able to purchase hot lunch. As far as the hallways go, there will be one-way hallways and stairwells at the middle school and high school. The high school cafeteria, there'll be alternate locations, also the senior courtyard. There's been additional picnic tables purchased for out there. They plan to use the B gym as another location for lunch, similar to the middle school, as well as the cafeteria. Also in all cafeterias where they're eating, there'll be a shield, a barrier that breaks up the table so that when the mask is off, if there's not 6-foot distancing, then there'll be a shield between the students so that they can feel safe eating. I think that's what I have on cafeteria, unless I'm missing anything. If I'm missing anything, please jump in.
I have a question.
Sure.
This is Mary Ellen Maloney, Board of Ed member. So the shield in the cafeteria, is it between the tables or actually at the table, like in the middle?
It would be sitting on the table in the middle. So let's say you could have Sal. Are you on now?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Do you want to speak to the shield, Sal?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
So we mapped out the cafeteria to make sure
Sal, we lost you. You started talking and disappeared really quickly.
Check. Anything now?
No.
So
sounded like you slipped into a hurricane there.
The shield will sit on the table. So if there's 2 students that are sitting next to each other and they're 6 feet apart, we're considering that social distance. But then there's students that are sitting directly across. The shield would be between them. So does that make sense, Mary Ellen?
Yes, it does.
Yep. So that's why dividing them up into groups of 4. So typically, at McGee, we're looking at the cafeteria being, typically 160 students or so, and then you're going to take and divide it up by 4. So we're looking at 40 students in each location. So you can spread them out, and then with the shield, you can socially distance appropriately, where the students can take off the mask and have their lunch and feel safe, because they either have a shield in front of them, they're still sitting with a classmate, or they have social distancing of 6 feet or greater.
Okay, thank you.
Are you back, Sal?
I'm trying. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Anything else you want to add, Sal?
Okay. No, you described it very well. So we're reducing the number of students. There'll be shield between students. We bought multiple tables so that students I think we bought about 30, 40 tables for the cafeteria. And again, Brian mentioned we'll have classes after that. So we'll have additional custodians trying to make sure that everything's clean. And some students will be eating in classrooms as well. And those will also either be 6 feet apart or they'll be sneeze guards as well.
Thank you.
So I think the next step is, so what about the instruction in the classroom and how does it look different? I think just speaking to you about the desks and the distancing, they're working in a collaborative effort, which we know, and I know I've got to receive questions from parents about, is this really the best instruction? For me to think that, any of us that have been in education think that not working collaboratively and some of the models that we've had before, not being able to put those in place because of safety, it is not the best, but it's the best we can do in this time to ensure safety. So I think it's important to recognize that the live instruction is still much better than virtual instruction or posting of assignments. And having to be at a desk versus a table because of a safety issue, our concern is safety first, and then to create the best educational environment we can, which is what we're striving to do here. And students typically at the middle school and high school would just, walk to the cafeteria and then leave the cafeteria and so on. I think that, there's going to be revisions into the interactions that are going to be allowed to take place, the number of students that would be in a hallway. I know, Sal, if you want to speak a little bit about students and how they'll be picked up at the CAF or how they'll return from the CAF versus how things used to be.
Sure. So students will be escorted to the cafeteria by teachers, and they'll be escorted back to the areas that they'll be eating in. So it's much like in elementary school where students are being supervised. There'll be arrows on the hallways. In the hallways, as long as they walk on the arrows, they should be quite fine. There'll be staggered passing times. So we're trying to really reduce the number of students in the hallway and increase the supervision at the same time.
And the high school's looking at with a block schedule, they're looking at staggering things also to decrease the number of students in the hallway, number of students in passing in a similar fashion. So we're at a point where it's, exiting the building and how does that take place? Exiting the building will be done in a much more structured fashion as done before. I know at the middle school, the students came out and they boarded the buses as such. I know that you've been working on Sal and exit plan. I know at the high school, how the students will be released will be much different also. We're not going to allow the students at any point to congregate. It'll be coming out in an orderly fashion, keeping socially distanced, and then either, we're working on for pickup, those students obviously, again, will have locations marked on the ground where students would have to stand and wait for the pickup where they'll be socially distanced from their peers. We recognize the part that we're working through is not knowing exactly, whether parents are driving their children to school. The number of drop-off and pickup could be quite large. So we have to be prepared once we know the numbers of how we're going to do the exits. Someone spoke about, well, typically the students are in the gym. Well, that's not going to be the case because that cohorting that we talked about, we're not going to break the cohorting to put all students from multiple cohorts in the gym unless we can properly socially distance them at 6 feet or greater. As far as band and chorus, the guidelines state that there must be 12 feet of distance between the students. They would not wear their mask for band or chorus, obviously, but there must be at least 12 feet. So the locations for meetings, the number of students that can meet for band or chorus will change greatly. I know that all the principals are looking at their buildings and thinking, where do I have that space where I can fit a large number of students at 12 feet or greater apart? And we'll work through that to make sure that we're having both, vocal and instrumental music taking place.
Brian, can I just jump into that?
Sure.
One of the concerns that has been raised was a comment that was made at one of the parent sessions about musical performances, plays, musicals, all of those things. And I know that some parents are concerned because for the kids that are very involved in those, that's a very important part of their school day. We're working very hard to try to maintain the integrity of those programs, but that might mean that we are doing some types of performances that are not our typical performances. It might be that we have times where students are performing to an empty auditorium and it's being live broadcast to an audience at home. It might mean that we're doing more virtual concerts, as many of our staff members arranged this spring, because we have to try our best to both provide the rich learning opportunities that those experiences represent for our students, and also the specific guidelines around the sizes of crowds gathering and the distances that need to be maintained.
Thank you, Aaron. I think one of the questions that's come up in many of the parent meetings is, contacting. Should there be a confirmed case of COVID-19, we would make contact to the parents, and we would share with you that there has been a confirmed case. As I said earlier, we would not to say that someone has symptoms Would we notify parents someone has symptoms or not confirmed? We would not do that. We would not do that. As someone said in the question, that you may be enduring, cold season, it may be cold, and be contacting and shutting classes. But I think it's important to note, people have asked, well, what will be the decision? I think that looking at contact tracing, looking at the cohorts that students are in, looking at the pattern or where the student or staff member has been, will then determine what should take place, whether it's asking classes for 72 hours, not, for students to remain out for 72 hours, asking them to self-quarantine for if someone was positive. But it will not be made by myself. The decision will be communicated. It'll be with the Central Connecticut Health District, and they'll ask for our plan and ask what we did, and they'll want to know, where did the student or staff member interact with what students, how often, and all those questions. And they'll guide us through what's the safest protocol to put in place, and then we would share that with all of you.
I think it's also important to note that our nursing staff in our buildings know our kids and will be in touch with the parents. So if you have a child who has seasonal allergies and is sniffly because they have seasonal allergies, our nurses know that your kids have seasonal allergies because that's already been communicated and would be in touch with you. So there seems to be a lot of fearfulness that kids are going to be sent sort of willy-nilly or without making contact with the parents. But we want to assure you that our school nurses have been working with us in this plan and will follow the protocols to make sure our kids are safe.
So if I could just share a little bit about, we talked what the plan has prompted as far as resources being spent to ensure safety. So I spoke to you about the 6 custodians. We've hired several paraprofessionals. We will be hiring that each building needs at least a nurse and 1 nurse's aide, maybe 2. We need isolation rooms at all buildings for those students who may be exhibiting symptoms or staff members. That means additional beds. That means isolation barriers that need to be put up, meaning that isolation room, you can't have just a curtain in between them. You need to have a barrier between the beds, because obviously if someone is suspected to have symptoms, doesn't mean that they are positive, and you wouldn't want to have 3 or 4 people together not knowing that. We've purchased camera systems, as I said, for the middle school and high school, camera system and monitoring system. The number of desk shields that were purchased, the PPE with the masks, the shields. I'm just trying to think of anything, additional tables, additional chairs, desks. The district has spent, at this point, over $1 million preparing for the reentry of school, with items that otherwise we would not have purchased at this time. We are doing our best to ensure the safety of both students and staff, to eliminate the possibility of anyone getting sick or allowing, but also allowing staff and students to feel, and you as parents to feel comfortable and confident with what we're doing, to the best ability that we can. I think it's important to everyone note that. We are definitely, as Aaron shared, consulting. I have a weekly meeting with the Hartford area superintendents, with all the superintendents in the Hartford area. We talk about our plans. We talk about safety protocols we're putting in place. We share notions of what might be best practice given the constraints that we have. I know the principals have similar meetings. I know Aaron does. So it's not that we're operating in isolation or not looking at what others are doing for best practice. So I'm hoping that you have confidence in the plan and confidence in us. And I think it's important that, I know you're able to email your questions to Rich. If you have additional questions, feel free to reach out to the principals, reach out to myself. If you did send me an email for questions, I hope I answered those in those parent meetings last week, or that the administration did. I also have had email responses back to you that if you'd like to schedule a time to discuss on the phone any additional questions, you feel free to reach back out to me if your questions weren't answered. We are putting together a Q&A sheet that we'll have ready for you on Friday. It'll be with that spec sheet on the cleaning procedures and what we're using for cleaning products. as well as the air quality sheet. You'll also have a Q&A sheet that will go out on Friday to all of you with questions and answers that have been frequently asked. But I guess if you have specific questions that haven't been asked or questions you're not aware of, even if it's been asked before, please feel free to reach out to us and have that conversation.
I would say one good thing to do as well, Brian, another resource is even if they weren't able to make it to those meetings, they're available on YouTube because they were all recorded. I was just looking actually to see the numbers of people. We've had an extraordinary number of parents who've watched those videos, hopefully answering their own questions in the meantime. 600-700 at each level have been watching those videos to kind of get the answers to their questions. So thank you for running those as well as being able to answer all these questions. Do we have, before we go to other topics, any other board members, anybody have anything they want to say or any questions before we move off? It's a lot of information flying. I think Matt has a question.
Brian, let me just first say that to you and the reopening committee, obviously a lot of thought and effort has gone into this, and I'm appreciative of that. You've covered a lot of my questions already, but I want to play a little what if, right? So let's say that a student on bus A tests positive for COVID-19, and he's been riding this bus for however long, and he is in a completely different classroom with the kids on that bus. How are the parents going to be notified? I mean, that could be up to 60 kids. We know that this virus can be spread really quickly. You may not have an answer to this, but as we pay attention to how quickly this can spread and how it has impact on, the research on children is still being accumulated, but we know that it impacts parents, elderly folks, and so on. What happens? How do those? What would the school do at that point?
So what we've done in the past is we've put together, obviously, email lists. We use our school messenger system to build those cohorts that we have of students. We would build cohort communications so that we can get out information quickly to the groups. But it would not be in isolation as far as my decision. It would be a conversation with the Central Connecticut Health District, with Charles Brown, the director, about, okay, the student rode bus A, sat in this seat. There were X number of students around. Should those students be contacted? Should the whole bus be contacted? And then in the classroom, should the students in that classroom be contacted? Which I'm saying the students in the classroom, without a doubt. If another student was sitting in that seat or in proximity, I would say they should be contacted too. But I don't want to make that statement. That's my belief. But in speaking to the health department and speaking to Charles Brown probably weekly, the protocols that are being set in the various health districts, because it's speaking to the superintendents, are very different. Each health director is giving different advice. And so the advice he gave was, if there's an issue or concern, make the phone call. I will discuss with you the cohorting that you had in place. I'll discuss with you the contact tracing as far as where that student went, and then we'll come up with what's the best plan. So what I'm saying, if there's a student that was positive in a classroom, my belief is that I would just do it. Regardless of what Charles said, I would contact all those parents. If a student was on the bus and they sat in the front seat and they got off first, am I necessarily saying the whole bus should be contacted? I want to have someone say whether that's the best. Obviously the bus is, could be up to a 30-minute ride on the bus. But I think that's important to have the assigned seats, know which students were in close proximity, and then to get some help on whether we should contact the whole bus or not.
Thank you.
Does anybody else from the board have any questions at this point? Tim, you have a question?
Yeah, Tim Oakes, board member. One thing that I know I've read some things on, but Brian, maybe you or David can talk about, is the sort of modifications that we're planning for gym classes and the things we're going to be doing with the kids. I mean, I would imagine that we're not going to be, playing floor hockey and things like that, where the kids are going to be bumping into each other. Just kind of expanding on that for everybody's benefit.
Dave, I'll gladly let you answer that if you want, but Tim, you're absolutely right. It's going to look much different. Dave, would you like to elaborate on that?
Yes, absolutely. We're actually working on a plan, talking to all elementary teachers, middle school teachers, high school teachers. I think what we're going to be looking at is getting away from the team sports aspects and really focusing on games
and individual activities, things like, dance, fitness, aerobics, yoga, things of that nature, where they're more individually practiced versus allocating all the equipment and all the kids working in teams like basketball and soccer and so forth. So there's still a lot of information to disseminate, obviously, based upon the spaces that are available. I know that some of the PE classes are going to be, for the most part, outside as much as possible moving forward. But it really can be a work in motion and a progress motion with having conversations with all teachers from all different schools, but really taking away the element of those team sports and really focus on individual aptitudes for the students.
Do you see a class on snow shoveling? Maybe we can save some money on that front.
I don't know about that, but yeah, I mean, we're going to be very creative. I'll tell you that. We got some great teachers that are brainstorming some really good ideas, and we've been in constant communication over the past week.
Great, thanks.
No problem.
Anybody else with any specific questions before we go further?
No, Rich, I have a question real quick. Jamie Miller, board member. Brian, I was just hoping, or maybe, one of the other administrators, is there a way for us as a board member, just because of the magnitude of questions coming in from parents, that we'd be able to go see what one of the schools looks like with the cameras and, how you would walk through the halls and what it would look like, so we could at least experience it, so I can better, communicate what it looks like.
Another board member suggested it also. I think that's a good idea. We're not going to be able to open up the building to parents, even when the school year starts. It's going to be, even at this point at central office and the buildings, we're taking all of our meetings out in the lobby, and we're not only letting, employees behind back into our offices, which we typically would say, come on in the office, sit down. Really trying to have that barrier between limiting the number of people. But I think coming in and even having a video, letting board members see is fine, as well as having a video made so that parents can see what it looks like in the building. And I know that we spoke of, and especially with the transitional grades where students haven't been in the buildings, I know that Al shared a little bit about K students working out a way to bring the parent and the student in the building, so they can at least get a feel for the building. And I know we talked about that at the middle school too, and the high school. But I think once we get things in motion, all the resources that I shared with you this evening, getting board members to be able to put put eye on it, maybe even to do, whether it's a recorded, a video of what the building looks like and how it's set up and structured, and the desks. That I think is a great idea.
Thanks,
I think
Brian.
go ahead, Jamie. I'm sorry.
One
No,
more
you go.
question. About the camera system, and I hope I didn't miss this, but it's not something that's attached to the wall, correct, Brian? It's like
No, let me just elaborate a little bit on that, just so we know. So, if we started in a live, if we started in a live 100% setting, I want to make sure that parents understand. If you're sending your students back to school at pre-K through 5, parents who elect to have their students learn remotely, meaning they're not coming back to school, there will be a teacher assigned to those students who are learning remotely. That teacher, we don't know the numbers yet. That teacher may teach multiple grade levels. The teacher will be certified at that grade level, but that's how those students will receive instruction virtually via Zoom. That's elementary. Other students learning in the classroom. 6 through 12, we will have a camera system in the classroom. The camera system is mounted on a cart, and it has a 40-inch monitor on it, as well as a control pad, and the camera sits on top, and you're able to direct the height and move the cart around. It's totally self-contained. It interacts with Zoom. There's a remote control that the teacher has, so the teacher can position the camera on the board and themselves solely. The teacher could position them. So if the teacher did that on the board themselves, the teacher would then see the students on the monitor at home. The requirement would be that students have to have their monitor on their computer so they could be seen during the instruction. The lesson would not be recorded; it'd be live, and part of that is to deal with the privacy issues. Parents and students have to sign a privacy agreement that they would not record or post any of the videos, but those students would be able to receive that live instruction from the teacher as the teacher is teaching the students in the classroom. That's grades 6 through 12. So students who chose remote learning, that's how they would receive. So if they had 5 classes for the day, they would have 5 Zoom classes as they normally would, but they would be virtual. If we went to the hybrid model, students would use the cameras again, because now students can still receive, we had a split A-B group to decrease the numbers. The A group would be in class, the B group would be receiving the instruction virtually, and then whether we flip, as our plan now, it's half the week, Monday, Tuesday A, then B would come into class Thursday, Friday, and A would be receiving virtually. So that's how the camera system would work. We demoed the camera system, I want to say 2 weeks ago. We had some staff members at McGee. We had some staff members in the classroom. We had the camera system in a classroom at BHS. I think we had a staff member at the Board of Ed. The sound quality is exceptional. The picture's great. We're working through the smart board. We can hook right up to it. We're working through the whiteboard. The lighting wasn't as good as we'd hope on the whiteboard, but with the smart board, it worked exceptionally well. So the whole notion of the camera is that we keep the educational environment that students are in and the contact time stays consistent, so they could still receive 5 days of instruction, whether you're from the same teacher, the same class they would be in, and the fluidity of, if they do decide to come back to school at some point, they've already been in the class, they've already been with that teacher, their schedule's already set, they come right back into the class. So I think it avails some the best possible options. And the reason we will have some available at the elementary, but developmentally we just didn't think it was appropriate. Having a student sit for 45 or 50 minutes on a Zoom at the elementary level is difficult. But there may be some uses. We did purchase some for the elementary, and if we need additionals, we'll look for that. I hope that answers your question, Jamie.
Thank you. Actually, before I rudely interrupted Jamie before her second question, I was going to suggest that maybe we should do some kind of a virtual tour like you were talking about, Brian, of the classrooms, and we can put it up on YouTube, at least 10 or 15-minute tour, maybe what a typical classroom might look like, especially at the elementary schools or even McGee, more so than the high school, but especially at those levels. What do our classrooms look like so that the kids aren't surprised on day one when they walk in?
Rich, this is Erin McGurk, Assistant Superintendent. I want to tell you that they did a video like that for summer school that was showing what staff members would look like with the masks, showing like the social distancing and the marks in the hallway, showing the virtual high five if you can't touch your friends. And the families reported that it was very helpful in orienting their kids to summer school.
It's fantastic. That's exactly what I was thinking for before the first day of school. Thank you, Erin. Brian, back over to you. Do you have more that you want to go through, or have we covered what you wanted to cover tonight?
I think I've covered the points that need to be covered in the plan. And like I said, if there are additional questions, whether it be a board member, please reach out to one of us. I mean, reach out to the building principals, reach out to myself. I don't mind the phone call. And I know that the principals with the phone call can often clear up the question for you. And we will definitely have, I know at the building level, we'll definitely have another forum before the opening, where, with the parents and allow you to have any questions that you have at that time.
Thank you very much. Any other board questions or comments now before we go forward onto the next agenda item?
Rich, just one more comment, if I may.
Sure.
Tim Oakes, board member. As Matt had said, thank you to all of the administrators for everything that they've done with this. But the other thing that we all, I think, keep in mind and maybe take for granted is tomorrow there could be something that gets announced that completely changes all of this and undoes everything that we've done. And all of this planning goes completely out the door. So I want to just say it and ask the public and ask everybody that we've got to have that patience with all of these plans and know that on a moment's notice, everything can change again. I know we're all thinking it, and we're all trying to plan for it and prepare for it, but who knows what tomorrow is going to bring, or next week, or next month. And everything that we've talked about is potentially invalid, and we're following a different playbook at that point. So, just
thank you, Tim. Well said. Thank you. And I would add to that, honestly, I'm aware of what a lot of different districts are doing. Or at least what the plans are looking like. I've read many of them from my own district to multiple districts around. I'm really confident with where we are right now in Berlin in terms of the amount of time necessary to plan out the details, the unbelievably complex number of details that get us through an average day. So I again would like to thank you as well. I know you put a lot of time in, and we have about a month left to, put things, complete our plans, I guess, as much as they can be before the kids get there. So if we're done with the reopening plan agenda, the next one, Brian, I wonder if you could speak to the need to revisit this year's school calendar, the 2021 school calendar.
Sure. Approximately 2 weeks ago, the commissioner announced that they're waiving, with approval of the governor, waiving the 180-day requirement. We already did additional days beyond the 100 days, but waiving the 180-day requirement to 177, allowing for 3 days to be used for COVID training at the beginning of the school year. We currently had 3 professional development days at the beginning of the school year already. So what we're opting to do here is, and we're seeking approval, is we'd like to use the first week, the week prior to the 31st here, right here. So,
Rich, I'm sorry, this is Erin McGurk.
Yes.
Would you like me to project the proposed calendar adjustment?
It's a good idea. We have access to it, but the parents won't. So if you want to project that up, that would be fine with me. Thank you, Aaron.
And I'll keep talking here. So we're looking at the 24th through the 28th to be professional development days, which 3 of them would be the COVID days. We're looking at starting school, closes to start school on Monday the 31st as the first day of school for all. We're not decreasing our days to 170. We're decreasing our days 179 days, not the 177, which is the minimum that the commissioner allowed. We're asking that we have one additional PD day. We're asking to hold that day in case we need it. And at some point, if we needed it, we would then notify the parents that we would change the student day to a professional development day. We're just thinking that if we had to go out and we had to change the model, or something had to be some type of safety training, or something that we need that day for, typically our PD days are loaded at the beginning of the year. We may need something in the middle of the year if we do have to go out. If not, we would stick with the 179 days, which is one short of the typical state requirement, 180, but still 2 more than the 177 that's this year.
I know the governor has emphasized the need to potentially pivot during the course of the year and switch directions. So having that extra day in your pocket later on to be used, I think, is actually a smart idea, Brian.
Thanks for the calendar, Aaron. So I don't know if the board has any questions about why we would change the calendar. But those initial days, just to some of the required training for staff, there's plenty to do on those days coming back in. I think it's important to note how we ended last year and where staff were and where we'd be picking things up, as well as the safety protocols and training needs to be placed, structuring the classroom, obviously taking in all that PPE and setting up the desk guards and so on and so forth by the teacher. So there's a lot to do in that time, as well as the things that the trainings that we're mandated to do that we have to get done in that time that we do every year. Aaron, Aaron, you want to speak to a little more specific about, I know we spoke about some of the potential.
Yes. So essentially, we met with the administrative council and started to draft out the list of all of the things that we would need to do. So some of the things that are very specific to the COVID situation are time for training on the Zoom room system and the camera system for grades 6 to 12. And that is not only understanding the mechanics of how the system works, but also having time for teachers to experiment with the Zoom room and camera system setup, what it looks like in their particular classroom, and to learn the details of things like how to share their screen, how to share their smartboard, their whiteboard, document camera, etc. We also need to have time for grade levels and departments to meet regarding curriculum adjustments. So as Dave Francolangia shared earlier with the physical education staff, there are some specific changes that are going to be made in our curriculum because of the demands of this particular situation, and we need time for that to happen. And we also, in the interest of our focus on rebuilding relationships with students and thinking about the social and emotional side of bringing students back to school and back together, acknowledging that some of the families, some of our students have experienced trauma and tragic loss in their families during this time. We want to make sure that we're talking about the social emotional side of this and what we can do to support them.
Thanks, Aaron. So,
do you want to talk more, or we can do questions and answers after we have a motion?
Yeah, Rich, I will move to adopt the revisions to the 2020-2021 school calendar as presented. Tim Oakes, board member.
Do we have a second?
Jamie Miller, board member, I'll second.
Jamie seconds. All those in favor?
No,
I can't
hold on.
see every.
Wait.
I mean, I apologize. I didn't mean all those in favor. I meant to open it up. I'm sorry, Matt. I meant to open it up to questions, comments, discussion points.
I have a couple. I have a couple of questions, and I'm comparing the 2021 calendar to the 21-22 calendar, which is next on the agenda. But Brian, Aaron, I noticed that in 2021 you have teacher orientation on the 24th, and in the next year there is no teacher orientation listed as part of this criteria. So I guess my question revolves is, should that be a PD day and not teacher orientation, and that falls at a different time? Or because the two calendars aren't consistent with
Matt,
your notation?
It's a transition to the idea that those days before school starts are all essentially professional learning days. Last year, for example, we chose to start the year on Monday with a full day choice sessions. And even though it said teacher orientation on our calendar, we actually held convocation and the orientation on Tuesday because we thought it was helpful to have the professional learning time as early in that week as possible before people came back to school on that Thursday and Friday.
So let me ask this question. Let me ask it a different way then. On the 24th of 2020, who reports? Just the new teachers?
No, it's never been new teacher. That's not new teacher orientation. It's the traditional language that has been used to mark the convocation initial faculty meeting days. New teacher orientation is held the week prior to that. So all teachers report on the 24th.
All right. So then, for the sake of consistency, why does it not say that the next year so that?
Because it's actually a professional learning day.
Yeah, that's not flying with me.
Pardon me?
That doesn't. Never mind. Forget it. It's fine.
I think that the shift was that they're all PD days, even the teacher orientation, because typically the convocation day is teacher orientation, but that's an hour and a half tops. So yeah,
understood. I was just asking why it's not consistent year to year.
Yeah, I think it's just a change that was initiated. I think moving forward, the first day wouldn't be TO anymore. It'd always be PD now. And then, obviously the convocation or the first day would always be in one of those 3 days.
It also gives us more flexibility if we were, for example, to bring in an outside speaker for convocation or for professional learning. The specific day on which we do it might need to shift depending on the availability.
Okay. I have one question I don't think has anything to do with the calendar, but I am assuming that distance learning will be significantly more rigorous starting in the fall than what we held in the spring.
I can speak to that, and then Aaron, you can add in. We've had those conversations with staff at the end of this year. So I think if you ask staff, what's the expectations, then communicate directly that the expectations of the community, our expectations, and it should be everyone's expectations, is that the distance learning looks more different. It looks much different than it looked before. And the more part is the more live instruction that there's more of an accountability. We recognize that some of the shortcomings in speaking to the parents and speaking to the teachers. Teachers want the more accountability as much as the parents do. So in going to the live instruction, we didn't require students to have their cameras on or not to have a foot over their head or not to. So they would come in, and we could not gauge the accountability that students had if they were in a virtual mode. We know that this year that would be much different. We already said that the camera will be on. There'll be no footies on. You have to be present. And so that part, attendance will be taken. There'll be more of a comment. So more live instruction, more accountability, and we're going to start to talk about how assessments, what kind of assessments make sense, as well as how should an assessment be given, virtually. I can speak to at the collegiate level, teaching at Central, when I giving a math assessment, the camera had to be on. Students had to stay on the camera and then upload the assessment while we were watching to ensure that there was, that someone else wasn't doing the assessment. So we recognize that it was not what it could have been, but we also are proud of where we were given how fast we had to ramp it up. So I think there's already a foundation laid with the staff, administration, and we've been communicating that to parents too. So it will be much different and more rigorous.
Brian, not to belabor this, but in the spring, in March, you guys did a fantastic job converting over and being able to go and continue teaching virtually. I applaud you all for that. But the expectation that we hear from the community now is that was then, this is now. You've had a lot more time to plan. And the question that I've been asked is, will the school day look more like a school day as if they were, instructional time wise, as if they were in a regular school setting?
Where educationally appropriate. I think to take an elementary student and to say you're going to be linked into Zoom for 5 hours straight is unreasonable for a first grade student. But to say that there'll be portions, they may come on and off the Zoom 3 or 4 times during the day for 20 or 30 minutes at a clip, I don't think that's unreasonable. At the high school, middle school, we already have schedules laid out of how the classes would run, how many Zoom sessions they would have, within a day. So we already have that in place. It's in the building plans. Each building has their own plan. And so if you had your normal schedule, there's no one from the high school on it. Aaron, maybe you can speak to it. I have a copy I could share, but the high school, looking at the courses that students take, they would be signing on live for live instruction. I think it's 3 of the 4 days that they normally would have it. I mean, it's much different than it was before, where we started off in phase 1, which was posting. They went to phase 2, then phase 3. We never got to phase 4 with it because the school year ended. But it'll require much more live instruction with the teacher teaching the students in a manner where the students have to be present to receive the instruction.
So you and your team have always delivered what you've promised, so that's good enough for me at this point.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Really important questions, although it has nothing to do with the calendar, but excellent questions. And so I want to take us back, if you will. I have a question about the calendar, and it's a pretty loaded question, and I'm sure you probably haven't really given it a heck of a lot of thought yet. Are we done with snow days for our lifetime? Are we going to be, is the expectation going to be that we may be instructing on days when the kids aren't in school, since they all have devices and we have common platforms now?
Rich, this is Erin McGurk, Assistant Superintendent. We have not yet gotten clearance from the State Department of Ed to have a random, I'm going to call a snow day a random day, to have a random school cancellation count as having distance learning in place, to have that count as a school day.
So we have to get approval from them, in your opinion, on that?
It has not yet been clarified by them if they will allow that. The way that they're talking about closures right now, they're talking about short-term closures, for example, due to a COVID case, where they're saying they've been very clear in the language that the closures are 2 to 5 days. So the 2 to 5 days and the allowance for that to be distance learning because of a COVID closure does not seem to be open enough to say a single day closure for a school day is sufficient.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
While we have more tools and more devices, there are times when snow days are imminent and we're well prepared for it to happen. And in those cases, it would be clearly easier for us to have things prepared to go. But if a school closes, for example, for something like a water main break that we can't predict, I don't know that they would allow us to swing over to distance learning and count that as a day.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Hey, Rich, I promise this is a calendar-related question, but it's also loaded. Considering where we are in the current world with the social justice issue, at some point, should we be talking about the elimination of Columbus Day as a celebrated day?
I think that's a question that we should discuss at a future date. I know that we're talking, we have our equity and advocates group. I think that's a discussion that come up this year as we look towards the next calendar. We always can make a modification to the 21-22 calendar, if not the 2021. But I don't know if we're ready to have that discussion on 2021 yet.
I think I'd like the conversation to flow from that committee. That would create a good actionable step for them if they indeed decide to go in that direction. So I think that's not a bad plan, Brian. If there is a potential to change, that it can change the 21-22 calendar, which we can readopt again with the adjustments. Any other questions, comments? All right, then I call for a vote on this, and I'll do a roll call vote since several of you are traveling at the moment. All those in favor of the motion as it's been read, say aye. Adam?
Aye.
Jamie?
Aye.
Julia?
Aye.
Mary Ellen?
Aye.
Matt?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
Tracy?
Aye.
And I will also vote yes. That makes it 8-0 with Carrie not present. We have, am I looking at one more? Yes, we also have the 21-22 school calendar. Were there changes made to this, Brian, before we, or did we never formally adopt it?
Rich, I'm going to let Aaron speak to it because it came out of committee. It was
absolutely. Thank you.
Yes, Rich, this is Erin McGurk, Assistant Superintendent. The change that we made was to eliminate one of the afternoon professional development early releases at the recommendation of the committee.
Was it a specific one, Erin?
Yes, we had another one scheduled in March that we eliminated.
What was the rationale for deciding to eliminate it? Just out of curiosity.
The curriculum committee, including you and Jamie and Tracy, raised concerns about the number of afternoon professional releases.
Yep. Thank you very much. Do we have a motion?
This is Adam Selena, board member. I'll move to adopt 2021-2022 Berlin Public Schools calendar as proposed.
Do we have a second?
Tim Oakes, board member. I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any questions, conversations? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. We'll do a roll call vote again. I see Adam has arrived at whatever destination he is. So Adam, we'll start with you.
Aye.
Jamie?
Aye.
Julia?
Aye.
Mary Ellen?
Aye.
Are you okay? Oh, it sounded like something crashed. Matt?
Aye.
And Tim?
Aye.
And Tracy?
Aye.
And I will also vote yes. So that makes it 8-0. Before we have a motion for adjournment, I want to thank everybody, including all the administrators. I'd also like to, somebody's been bothering me all meeting, so I must have said the Pledge of Allegiance 10,000 times during my 35 years in education. I've never butchered it like that before. Halfway through, it all just disappeared from my head. So I apologize to all of our viewers who are wondering what the heck is going on during that. Sorry about that. Do we have a motion for adjournment?
Move to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye for now.